to continue to get better. Um, and you can see it over time that we've gone through. When you look through the history of the world, you will see that the world has gone through a number of revolutions, all of which have been people rejecting the status quo. But when you even look around you, anything you probably look around you today is a result of someone rejecting the status quo, saying we must be better, we must improve. And it's about that state of continuous improvement, innovation. And what you find over time is also lots of examples of where people have rejected the status quo and made a huge difference. If you take an example, maybe take two or three examples globally. If you go back to the early 1903, the Wright brothers, they were actually, repairing and selling bicycles, but they had a vision that they needed to, fly. And they worked for many years. People thought they were crazy, and they were able to, come up with a solution of the aeroplane. And today, I don't think anyone travels, long distance without being on the plane. But that was because they rejected the status quo at that time that, human beings could fly. Any example you look at telephone, Alex Bell in the 1870s, again, the ability to communicate with human beings initially was all about electric transmission of messages. But they decided that, you should be able to transmit voice. And today, we all use the mobile phones. But even if you come more closely, whether you think of fintech, you think of cryptocurrency, these are people rejecting the status quo that banks are the only one, for example, who can do cash transfers or financial transfers, and that you need banknotes to be able to, make exchanges. But people have just rejected that and have been able to find new solutions. And you can even see, in today's world, someone like Elon Musk is talking about living in Mars. I mean, I think if you had said so that people in the past that one day we'll live in Mars, people wouldn't have believed you. The Egyptians were trying to build, bricks to heaven. That was their own attempt to go out of the earth. But even if you look locally, be it you think of even independence of Nigeria, it was people rejecting the status quo of colonial masters, the democracy, people rejecting military rule in Nigeria, But even if you look at people like Inoxin who have decided to build cars in Nigeria, this is people saying, no, cars can be built in Nigeria. Or you even think about the youths who a few years ago rejected the SARS. So, everything you look around you points to just the fact that some people have said, no, we're not satisfied with the current status and we need to improve. But it's an inherent part of human being that we have continued to improve over time. Now, of course, there's a difference between rejecting the status quo and being recklessly rebellious. So those are two different things. Reckless rebellion is not, is not rejecting status quo. Reckless rebellion is a bit more on the negative side. Rejecting the status quo is not being satisfied with the current state and looking for a better way. The key thing about rejecting the status quo is that it's not about complaining about the status quo, it's about doing something about it. And that, I think, is what makes the big difference between people who make a difference in rejecting status quo and those who just complain about the situation. And I think the final thing I will say about it is really, what it also requires is an insatiable curiosity. It's people who are curious who can reject status quo. And that is, insatiable quest for better things, different ways of doing things, is what I think brings to life creativity and an ability to say no to the current state and to go for a better state.
Wow, thank you so much, sir. Okwemi, over to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Babs, for that. I have a question, which is that I want you to bring it home for us and share with us, examples of when you were in a situation where you had the opportunity to conform, conform to the earth mentality, but you chose to, do more. I'm privileged to have, read your book and seen your journey, see how you've navigated your journey career-wise, right? And you went in your role as working in the storeroom as a supervisor. You went from meeting, a literally disorganized storeroom that is lacking in security to get into a place where you stepped into your role and you were not going to take that. And it literally takes a man who sees beyond what other people see. And you literally went from meeting a disorganized place lacking security to renovating and constructing something that is world class. In your journey into that, or in your journey through that, there are probably people who are just cynical, or people who question what you're doing, discouraging people and all of that. How did you navigate the process of seeing something that is not right and choosing to do much more, taking ownership of your role and, doing something so much more, than you met it? Can you tell us that?
No, thank you. And, I think, which is the first thing that I said about, people not complaining, but doing something about it. I wasn't the first person that was in that warehouse that saw all the problems, but a lot more chose to complain about it and blame others about it. And I think it's the first thing, every time I say to people, anytime you find yourself complaining, you have stopped leading. You must not complain about situation. You must think about, what am I going to do about it? How do you make a difference? Because, it wasn't so difficult. Everybody in the warehouse were not happy about the total disorganized place. They were being accused of theft regularly. They were being looked down regularly. Even the managers were not happy about it. So there was nobody that was really happy about it. But many chose to complain rather than do something about it. So, if I leave something back with people, is about, you need to have a culture around you that's always about innovation, finding solutions, and going ahead to solve it. Don't find yourself just complaining about issues. But the thing about, when you find those situations is to be very clear, what are the issues that you want to address, because you could, look at too many things at the same time, and then, you're trying to change too many things and you never change many of them effectively. So in that case, for example, I identified about 4 things that I just wanted to do something about. One was about safety, because people were getting injured. The other was that materials were being stolen. So, nobody was happy about that. And the other part was the whole place just looked like a junkyard. And so, the first thing about it is, once you identified such a situation, you have to identify what exactly is wrong with it. Is it customer dissatisfaction? Is it safety? Is it cost? What exactly are the issues? Because that then gives you a clarity around, so how do we want to address this? And the next thing I then did, of course, was to research, where's the best practice? Because sometimes you don't have to create something entirely new. There are times you have to create something new, but in some other places, you just look for the best practice. And you might find that the best practice is not actually in your own area. It may be somewhere else. So for example, although I was in a warehouse of an oil and gas company, I felt that the best practices in warehousing were probably found in supermarkets, because if you look at most world-class supermarkets, they are very well organized, because that's what they do. So a lot of times you need to look beyond your own industry, look far to find where's the best practice for what you are trying to do. In some cases, you might need to create it. So, technology gives you a lot of solutions as well that you bring into. But I would say, many times it's just about finding best practice and implementing it where you are. It already takes you a lot farther than where you are. But once you have identified it, and once I identified what needed to be done, once I had identified the best practice, the next thing was to engage. You have to engage people. You don't, change is always done with people. When you go alone, you don't go too far, because people will either, stop you, make things difficult for you. So you have to carry people along. So engaging, sharing the business case, why it needs to be changed. And in some cases, you actually find that many people too feel the same way. So it wasn't too difficult to get a lot of allies, because they saw that there was need for change. Nobody would like being called a thief. Nobody liked getting injured. So it were things that people could relate with. And then once you do that, you sometimes need to, fight for resources, because resources will not always be available for you, financial, human, and you need to try and get that wherever it lies. And so I had to engage, at very senior levels, and was able to find the financial resources to make the change. We had a very clear vision, and the team was pulled along, and everyone then was able to work towards that vision. And sometimes, you also need to pilot. So say sometimes start small. Don't try and solve world hunger in one go. Do a pilot. Do it pilot in a small area. Make sure that if there are any improvements to your ideas, you can also take it in. So, don't shy away from feedback. The worst thing you can think is that you have the best ideas in the world and you don't take any feedback. So that's not great. So ability to listen is also very, very important. I always say that about change. It's like the body parts. When you think of your body parts, a number of them are the same thing you need for change. One is your brain. So you need your brain to be able to, be in a mindset where you don't accept. One of the things I never accept is something is impossible. There is nothing called impossible. So mentally, I don't accept it. When somebody says we can't do it, I say, no, we can. We have to find, we don't know how to do it yet, but we have to. So your brain is about, setting within yourself that mindset of we can improve, we can get better, we can do it. And then the other part is your ear. You have to always listen, so it's not always about yourself alone. Listen, because you may have the ideas, but, others may help you to shape it and to make it better as well. So the ability to listen is very important in a change process. And also is your mouth. You need to be able to communicate, engage, speak with people, clarify the vision. So that's very important. And your heart as well. You need courage, because change is not easy. But if you think about it, sometimes with the parts of what God has given us, those are the same attributes you need to reject the status quo. You start from your brain. You have to say, we don't accept this. It's not good enough. We can't be, accepting waste. We can't accept injuries. We can't accept cost. We can't accept inefficiency. And you can also accept that if you're an organization or a company, you cannot accept that competitors should beat you. So you must always be, trying to walk ahead of competition, listen to new ideas, and drive for change.
So profound. Thank you so much, sir, for that. I want to encourage everyone on the call. Please feel free to drop your burning questions in the chat room. I can promise you that Dr. Babs have answers for you. So please feel free to start dropping your questions. We're going to have our eyes out to be checking in on questions that are coming in. And please do all you can. It's not every time we get the opportunity to have the phenomenal Dr. Babs on here. So please make sure that you have all you need, your journal, your journaling, you're writing, your light bulb moments, you're jotting it down. The white man will say that the Palestine ink is better than the best bread in the world. So please jot all you can. And I'm so sure that this is going to be a profitable time for you. And we are only just starting. All right, over to you, Ogunlade. Do you have a question?
Yes, I do. Thank you so much, Dr. Babs. From what you have said, that I just don't change the status quo. First, I have to be curious. We have to be curious. And when we start complaining, then we have stopped leading. I think you were able to answer some of my questions, some of the things I'm going to ask next, except if you just like to shed more light. So I wanted to ask sir, that what are some approaches or strategies that can be effective in challenging the status quo? I know you mentioned a few, so I don't know if you can please delve more into this for our listeners. Thank you, sir.
So I think, maybe one of the ways to answer your question is also maybe give an example of, a time I rejected the status quo. I mean, there are many examples, but I'll just maybe share one. And in that example, hopefully you pick some of that. So I was once assigned to the UK to work for Shell in the UK. And I got in there, of course, from Nigeria. You know, the first thing you have to understand is that you don't come with any best practice from Nigeria. So you actually are there to learn. But at the same time, as you are learning, it doesn't stop you from, you know, identifying things that you think can be done differently. So at some point, I was actually looking after marine assets, vessels. So in the North Sea, you know, you have these vessels that take materials to various platforms, various rigs offshore. And, you know, we had about 10 of these supply vessels. They cost about £20,000 a day. And so, you know, the money quickly adds up to tens of millions of dollars very quickly. And so, you know, I looked at this for about a week. I noticed that for most of the vessels, we were going maybe about 30% empty. And so, you know, I said, yeah, that can't be right. 30%, you know, if we're spending $100 million, for example, on all these boats, 20% of it is $20 million. That's a lot of money. And so, you know, I identified that sort of value as something that I think we can go after. How do we improve significantly that? But of course, you know, there's a reason why the current approach is done. And that's one of the things you will always confront, is that there's always a reason why the approach you meet. So one of it was, of course, that vessels were dedicated to drilling rigs and were dedicated to platforms. So, you know, for the drilling rigs, you will always just have one vessel dedicated. It doesn't matter, because the logic is that the amount, what it costs a day for a drilling rig is so much that you don't want it to be idle for one day. And then for some platforms, you have one vessel going to two platforms. And so, you know, after studying all of this, I then looked around. I think I looked at the Gulf of Mexico and Brazil, and I noticed that they were doing something slightly different, which was that they were in a kind of milk run, whereby they put all the vessels together and they go around delivering across. And so, you know, I came up with the same idea to say, look, we could pull these vessels together and just have them going in a milk run. So, you know, rather than them going, you know, in a one directional, we have them going around in a cycle. And of course, the first person that thought I was, you know, maybe I was on some drugs was the drilling manager. He said, "What are you talking about? You know, even if you save all your drilling, all your vessels, the cost is not up to my drilling rig. So I cannot afford a minute or a day of delays." Which is the other thing you find when you are trying to make changes is, and you are rejecting something, is that people will tell you why, and there will be big reasons. And he had a good reason. It was very expensive. While the vessel cost $20,000 a day, or pounds a day, a drilling rig costs about $300,000 a day. So the order of magnitude is indeed quite significant. And so, you know, the first thing you get typically is you'll be pushed back. So I was pushed back, as you know, it won't work here. You have to go back and rethink and you know, engage, which I did. And so, you know, I still came back and had solutions to address his concern about, you know, if there are situations where we need to respond in an emergency, how do you do it when you have these vessels just doing a make run? So, you know, I had then looked beyond the organization. I had looked at other oil companies that were in the same region, and actually saw that we actually could pull together the whole industry. So it wasn't just about just one company, but the whole industry. And if we did that, we could indeed have more flexibility, because there will always be a vessel, you know, taking off, arriving. And so that's what we then did. So, you know, I was able to expand the idea from just within the one organization to across the industry. I was then able to go back for a formal conversation with the senior leadership in the company. And of course, the drilling manager was very clear, and he actually, you know, said that this was going to be a disaster. And that then meant that everybody looked at me and said, "Are you sure you're ready to do this?" But some believed in it, some leadership believed in it. So I said, "Yeah, I think we can do it," because I had engaged with the team, I had engaged with customers, and it was clear we could. And so we went after, we did a trial. We first did a pilot, which is what I say, always do a pilot, because don't start it with full blast. We did a pilot in one of the areas, and we did it successfully. And we were then able to expand it to the whole UK. And we saved about 20 million pounds, which was exactly what I had said to the manager, that it was better, whilst you don't want to lose anything, you can still save money. And 20 million pounds is not something to just waste. But I remember, about a year after that exercise, I met this drilling manager on a lift, and he looked at me and said, "You are a brave man." I was very sure. He said, "I was very sure they would sack you. I thought you didn't know what you were doing. You come from Nigeria. You just bringing this, rejecting what we are doing." He said, "But it turned out to be, correct what you did. We didn't suffer any problems. We saved all the money." So I think, one, you must have a clear business case. What exactly do you want to achieve? Why are you changing what exists? It could be financial, it could be competition. You may want to beat competitors. How do you want to do it? It may be something totally new. You may design it totally new. It may be something you learn from somewhere. Sometimes it's also something you learn from elsewhere. So, for example, I talked earlier about the Wright brothers in 1903. One of the things they were very good at was the ability to read wide. So they read everything from poetry to biology to, you will have thought they were only reading engineering, but they read everything, encyclopedias, birds. And that's what you find, is that sometimes the solution, the creative solutions you are looking for, may not necessarily always be in your area. It could be something totally different. And if you're not curious, if you don't have this ability to read wide, you probably miss out a lot of opportunities. But you will, once you come up with the ideas, you will find people who will challenge it. You will find people who will think, are you crazy? But you have to be dogged. You have to have the courage, and you have to be prepared. In some of these things, to really fight through, especially when you are competing with others. If you don't fight through, if you think of some of the ideas that have, pushed through, they had to be really different. Many people today don't remember Kodak. Many people don't remember BlackBerry. But those were things that existed at some point. But some people said, no, we need to do differently. And today, those are the iPhones of this world, or the, phone now taking over cameras totally, nearly, getting it out of circulation.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that. That's like a lot to unpack all at once. But I'm going to layer on the very last point you made, which is on growing curiosity. Sometimes the solutions you're trying to provide is not even necessarily in your immediate environment. It has to be that you are reading wide, you're opening up yourself to knowledge, you are seeing beyond where you are. And so that's going to lead me to my very next question. In your words, Dr. Babs, you said that significant opportunities can be found if we choose to look beyond the company's boundaries. Now, there may be young people on the call, or people who are working within a system, who are looking for ways they can just do beyond what the task that is being committed into their hands every day in their 9 to 5, or even in their businesses. You said, one thing I know that you said that really jumped at me in your book is that it is not the job in itself, but what you make of the job, right? Can you just throw so much light on that profound thought? We'd like to hear from you.
Yeah, so thanks, and it's always about, for young people especially, as you said, when you get into a job, the way I went into all the jobs I did, there were always three things that I always said. I'm always a man of few things. I always try to do just few things. And three things I always say about a job is that the first thing you must do about a job is to deliver on that job. You have to deliver. Because if you don't even deliver on your job, then it's very difficult for people to have any confidence in you. And without that, then you let the organization down. But once you have delivered, once you've gotten very comfortable with delivering, the next thing you have to think about is, how do you improve? The worst thing you can do to yourself is that you leave a job the same way you met it. I say then if you did that, then they should have put a robot there, because then you haven't done anything. So you must always think about, what am I going to do differently? Am I going to bring in new technology? Competitors doing something different that I need to be ahead of the game? Am I going to reduce cost significantly? You have to identify something at least that you're going to do significantly different, such that, when others look at that, they'll say, wow, we didn't know that that job was even that interesting and could bring so much value. And you typically will find value beyond what you are doing, always looking for that, having that curiosity to say, how can we be better? How can we do this differently? Is always very, very important. And then the thing you have to also do, in every job, I always say, is to build relationships as well. So jobs are not just for you to just be thinking about yourselves. Always think about building relationships, because if you don't have the relationships, you will not be able to even achieve a lot. People will make life difficult for you. So always deliver. Find out what are the key deliverables, 2, 3 key deliverables of the job you've been assigned. Make sure you deliver them, exceedingly, because, as I think it was Martin Luther King that said it, I think, that, if they ask you to sweep the floor, sweep it so well that they will ask, who swept this place? And it's because they found that you swept this place so differently from everybody that has been sweeping that they'll say, wow, if you can do it that well, then we have to give you something even more important. All the jobs I've ever done have always been because on the back of having done something good in the previous job. I've never been one to ask for a job. And that's what you do when you do a very good job. They will look for you. They will call you to come and do the next job. And then have this ability to improve. Just always look to improve. And improve, like I mentioned, is, think about transforming it. How can you do it totally differently? Maybe I'll give a quick example on that. So I was also once asked to look after logistics in Nigeria. And in one of the places were our logistics bases. So we had bases in Port Harcourt, in Kidney Island, where we stored materials. We had a jetty, we moved materials out. And this was costing us a lot of money. So I think every year we spend probably about $10-15 million hiring vessels, hiring trucks, employing people, all of that. It was a cost center. So $10 million cost center. And I said to my team, I said, look, why don't we turn this cost center into a revenue center? Why is it a cost center? I don't accept that we have a facility, it should be a cost center. Let's turn it into a revenue center. And, we then thought about it through and said, look, we're not using most of the space anyway. There are others who may want to use the space. So why don't we bring somebody as a third party to come and manage the whole base rather than us managing it? Let them sublet a lot of these spaces. Let them sublet, trucks. We are usually, I do most times, sublet cranes and all of that. And actually, bring revenue for us. And we don't employ any people anymore. He employs them. And so that's what we did. We got in a third party. He came in. He was able to see the opportunities when we explained it. And he then said, look, I'll take over all the costs of running this place. And I will start to pay you revenue from the third party businesses I'll be bringing in here. And that's exactly what happened. But it was such a difficult change at that time, because typically in the oil and gas industry, you have to go through an approval process. So one of the first things I was told by the lawyers was that you have to go and get approval of the major shareholder, who was the National Oil Company. And I said, no, we're not going to get any approval. We're just going to go ahead. And the lawyer said, you can't do that. You have to go and get approval. I said, show me where it says I must get approval when I am earning money. I'm not spending money. I'm going to earn money for the organization. I'm not going to go and seek any approval. If I was spending money, I would seek approval. And so the lawyer said, you can't do that. If you have to do that, then you have to sign that you are putting the company at risk. And if anything happens to the company, you'll be held responsible. I said, so fine, let's do it. And so I signed for them, and we went ahead, and we stopped spending money, so we were no longer a cost center. We were earning money for the business, A year after I left, the national oil company actually wrote a letter back to the company saying, well done, we saw you are earning money for us rather than spending money. And that's what you see sometimes is that, the actual recognition comes way after, not during the time you are trying to make the change. But you must be ready. You must have the courage to say, yeah, we will go ahead. We will do it. We're doing the right things. We are saving money for the company. We're not spending money. We're bringing revenue. And that, will make a big difference. So that is one thing I would say is that you must always look for the opportunities to do something totally different. Turn a cost center into a revenue center. You will find people who will challenge why you're doing that and what you have to do to make it happen. Be willing to also say, no, we don't have to do all of that. Sometimes I say, commit the offense and beg for forgiveness rather than go to beg for approval.
Thank you
Because if you
so
beg for approval,
much.
you won't get it.
Yeah. And so we have an interesting question in the chat box, and I think it's something that we all need to learn from. You need to help us address. So the person says a financial challenge has been a major hindrance opposing this change of status quo. So he went ahead to give an example. Personally, I have the goal of picking and training very young youths in the area of tech and offering a free mentorship section from time to time. He says, and one of my goals is gifting laptops because an average Nigerian family wouldn't have the capacity to get a laptop of a young child in secondary school. So can you please shed more light into this?
Well, if I understand the question well, it's about resource challenge. I talked about it also when I spoke in the warehouse. You will have resource challenge. Typically, most changes require some investment of either finance, human resources. So you will always have that. You will then have to think hard. How do I get this? So, for example, he was talking about laptops. He or she, sorry, let me not be presumptive that is a he. He or she was talking about a laptop to donate. There are many agencies in the world today who are actually donating laptops to countries and to organizations. I was even just reading earlier today, I think it was EDF or so. One of the things they have is also to provide laptops for some of the places they support. So, one of the things you have to, which I said earlier, you always have to look beyond yourself. If you're looking for resources just within yourself, it will be limited. Many times you have to think of partnership with others. So those partnerships will allow you access to things that you will not have yourself. You have to think of other organizations in the world that have the resources that they probably are helping to develop countries that are still going through challenges. Look into that area. But don't shy away from partnerships. Sometimes I see people in the organization, they want to do it all. They want to take all the value in the idea and the opportunity. Sometimes, get partners, find people who work with you and expand your ability to reach into resources. But look beyond even the country, look globally. Some of the resources that have come into the tech business in Nigeria have come from outside Nigeria. And that ability to research, to find out where the opportunities are, and to be able to access it, I think is what I would suggest to the person who has the question.
Thank you so much, sir. There's one more question here, although maybe you can help us answer just a moment. It says, how do you manage human resources as a leader?
So that's an interesting question. So your best resource, and by the way, Omalade, I can maybe after this I can see the hand of Hakeem Olagunju, of one of my great friends. The human resources are your most valuable resource, and sometimes people struggle with that because you could find resources that either are really innovative, creative, and you could find resources that are human resources that are maybe not pulling their weight and all of that. When I was much younger, I used to think that if people are not pulling their weight, then you have to think about consequence management. But as I grew older, it became very clear to me that inherent in every human being is huge talent, is huge ability to do a lot. What sometimes is missing in a lot of people is the right conversations, the right engagement, and creating the right culture that will allow people to really bring their best out. And so anytime you have, human resources that are not really giving you your best, you should ask yourself whether have you created the right culture as a leader? Have you created the right culture to make them to excel, to make them to thrive? It's always this that I say, as a leader, if you find yourself pointing a finger, then 4 fingers are pointing to you as the leader, because you are the one who should create that opportunity for them to thrive. And you need to find out why, what are the issues, because your role as a leader is to be able to help clear the way for people to excel, for people to have the resources and the things they need to do their jobs well. And many times people get frustrated when they don't have that, or they are distracted into other things. Your role as a leader is to, just creating that culture, creating that environment, and engaging with your staff to be able to bring out the best in them. You must always see your staff as huge, huge resources, because sometimes innovation and creativity come out from your staff because they're different. They can think differently. They can, act differently. But that's also where creativity comes. If everybody is the same, then creativity will be very limited. And so diversity is very, very valuable, and you should welcome it. You should create a culture where people can speak up and where they feel happy to come to work every day and they want to achieve something. So my only response to the person who has the question is, as a leader, it's your role to bring out the best in your staff by creating that culture and by making sure that you're able to engage with them, communicate with them, and to bring out the best out of them.
Thank you, sir. Okay, over to you.
Thank you so much, sir. So over to you, sir, Mr. Akim Olaguju. Thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, thank you so much. Dr. Motowa, thank you so much. The example you gave about the massive change and impressive one that took place in Shell was quite impressive. And reading your book too, from storeroom to boardroom, I saw that you did quite do another thing like that, bringing in Caverton helicopter instead of Bristol, trying to bring in local content and all that. But my question and my concern is the environment where you worked, the place where you worked, which was Shell, which I would refer to as a very sane, environment to work. If you kind of find yourself in a public sector environment in a third world country, where, your changes are pushed back for some other, interest that you don't understand, what do you do? When you propose this change to your senior and the pushback, what do you do in a public sector environment in a third world country? Thank you.
Thank you, Hakim. Great question as usual. And I think maybe I will say that I would rather use example of those who have done it, because if I start talking about how it will be done, the natural question is, but you haven't been there, so why are you doing it? I remember, about a year or two ago, I spoke to a lady who was the CEO of one of the promotion commissions in Nigeria, public sector organization, and she had transformed the place. But in the process, she was dragged to the National Assembly, she was dragged to EFCC, she was dragged everywhere. And when I spoke with her, she said a few things which I thought were, very, very, because she also had read my book, and she thought, this was the kind of thing she was trying to do, and she was going through all these challenges as you described. But what she described was also the tenacity to change. Change is never easy. Yes, it's probably easier, as you said, in a private sector. I wouldn't say exactly that. There have been people who have tried to change things in oil and gas that have got killed. So it's not as if people really don't get killed in the oil and gas industry. But it's more difficult in the public service. But I think the tenacity she had to change, the ability to stay very, very clear. I think one of the things that was very clear with her, which I also found very useful in private sector, is once you have integrity yourself, because the first thing people wonder when you are trying to make a change is what are you benefiting from it? You know, what you are benefiting something. And so if they don't see that you are benefiting anything, it starts to reduce their ability to take you on. And that's why they took her to EFCC, they took her to ICPC, you know, they were taking her everywhere, but she came out clean in every investigation that was done. But she was able to also, you know, one of the things I always say in public service is you must make sure that you are working with whoever your appointed you, because that's very important in public service. The first question you must ask is, are my goals or are my intent the same as the intent of who is appointing me? If you are appointed by someone who has a different agenda, I will encourage you, don't bother. But if you have the same agenda with the leader who appointed you, he or she provides you an initial cover, because you know that is where people will first go to go and say, look at what Mr. A is doing. You need to remove him or remove her. He's making all this problem. But if you had the same alignment with them when they appointed you, were very clear, this is what I want to do, are you okay with it? Then you have that initial cover. But you have to then still walk through the issues because you will go through challenges. And but I think your integrity must be impeccable, because without that, your change will be easily rubbished. It will be said it's because you are gaining something out of it, because there are people who are benefiting from the existing system who will not like to see that change. And so if you are making a change and you are not yourself incorruptible, then that's where they will model everything up. But she brought in a lot of the, which is what I was saying earlier, you need to learn to bring in best practices from elsewhere sometimes. So she brought in a lot of the best practices that she had learned from the private sector, and many of them work very, very well. But I think I would say, you know, one, make sure the appointing authority is on the same page with you in terms of the reforms and changes you need to do. If you don't have that alignment, then you know it will be much more difficult. And two, make sure you are also impeccable yourself, so that people don't easily throw rocks at you and get you off the page. And then make sure the best practices you are bringing are well tested, and everybody can see it where it has worked, so that they cannot say this will not work. But I agree to the heart of your question. It's more difficult in public sector, I would say, than in private sector.
Amazing. Thank you so much, sir, for that.
Thank you so much.
My next question was going to be about integrity, which I think you already addressed or spoke a bit about in your previous answer. So I'm just going to take a question from the chat room. Our time is fast spent, so we may not be able to address all the questions here, but I'm just going to pick this out from Mary Katambi. It says, how can I effectively approach decision makers in a company to build meaningful connections and enhance my networking efforts?
Yeah, it's a great question. That's a very important thing to always do in an organization. You need to have the network. And I always say, don't build network on when you need it. So you have to build network way before you need it. And that requires you typically, so if I give you an example, if I want to build a network with a senior leader, one of the first things I will try to find out is what is important to that leader this year. So I will try and find out. Typically each leader will tell you what's important. Maybe it's technology change, maybe it's they want to beat a particular market, maybe they want to do some reforms, maybe they want to reduce costs. You will typically find out what is the things that are important to them. The first thing you should then do is, where do you connect to those things that are important to them? Because relationship, as I say, is always about you giving first. Most people think of relationship about getting, but relationship is about you giving first. You have to give first, because the more you give, the more the person you've given owes you a lot. And so when I find what's very important to that leader, I then look at my work and think of how can I contribute towards that? Is it that I offer myself up for some projects in his department? Is it that I do some specific projects that will, contribute towards that? I make sure I'm doing something to contribute towards that leader, because it is in that work activity that he or she will see you, typically as a junior person. And it's from there they will start to get an impression about you. Is Mary a very reliable person? Is Mary someone that gets the job done? Is Mary someone that delivers value? Is Mary a very, a competitive person against external competitors? So in those work interactions that you've created is where you first start to get them to see you at work, and that then creates opportunity for further conversations. There may be leaders that you just want to have as a coach or as a mentor. That again is a different type of conversation. You typically would identify what you want them to coach you on, or what you want to mentor them on. They have to be very specific. So some people will say, I want you to mentor me in my career. I'm confused. I don't know whether I should go here or go there. I want you to mentor me. And some people say, I want you to coach me. I don't understand this AI, or I don't understand something. So coaching is about something very specific. Mentoring is a bit much broader. For those ones, you have to approach someone who, one, you admire, two, who has demonstrated enough interest in coaching or mentoring others, and you then approach them with a very clear discussion where you articulate your what you've done, your progress, where you are heading to, and what the issues you're struggling with, what you admire in them, why you think they will be the best coach for you, and what you intend to be able to achieve that will also contribute to them. So, I will say you have a number of options to senior leader. One is about focusing on something that is of interest to them and working in that direction. That will get you noticed. That will get them to start to build an impression about you. And what that allows them to do, people misunderstand three things. There's a difference between a coach, a mentor, and a sponsor. There are three different roles. You can coach many people. You can probably mentor a number of people as well, but you will only sponsor a few people. The people you will sponsor are the people you really have confidence in, because you want them to go and achieve great things. So if I'm putting my name against you to say, I want to put, Mr. A in this position, it must be somebody that I'm absolutely confident will go and do a great job. Because if that person fails, everybody will say, you sponsored him or her and he failed. That means you're not a great sponsor. Sponsorship has to be something the person has seen a lot in you, has identified you as a talent, has seen you deliver on things, and they then can sponsor you. While coaches and mentors are different, and they're just helping you out in a specific area, and they can help you also to clarify where you are not so clear on your future direction as well.
Thank you so much, sir. We'll be taking the final question. Sir, bringing it down home now, what is the most exciting part of being the founding president of NUTM for you? What is the most exciting aspect?
So, people ask me sometimes too, why did you left the oil industry, with a stellar career, you retired, and you came out of retirement? And I explain it to people that, one of the first things as a leader, you first have to think of at some certain stages, how do you give back? And especially for those of us who have worked in the private sector. Private sector is always very small, relatively. The oil and gas is relatively small. So you need to think of where can you give back that you'll be able to positively impact a lot more people. And so, education has always been key for me. I started off my career as a teacher. And so, I've seen the transformation of people that it's the most fulfilling thing I've ever seen is when I see people, come in, they start little, they don't know so much. By the time they finish, they are transformed and they go on to do great things. And when I see them, in future, I'm amazed at what they have achieved. That gives me all the satisfaction that I want. And so, education, of course, was a big part. But, I had also then gone to Igbinedon University a few years back to deliver the convocation speech. And one of the things I had articulated very clearly was that the universities in Nigeria were letting down the students. They were really not preparing students for the future. They were not embracing technology. They were not embracing entrepreneurship, which was going to be very key into the future. And they were just still teaching people to memorize and to regurgitate, which was not going to, help people to compete, the young ones to compete into the future, especially in a global world where competition is now global. And so, coming out of that convocation speech, of course, I had been engaging with the promoters of NUTM, and we had a conversation where, the opportunity to then be more active in this transformation. We discussed it, and I felt it was the right people. So the first thing I always look for is, are they the right people to work with? And I was absolutely convinced that these are the right people to work with. Is the vision in line to what I was talking about exactly? It was technology, it was entrepreneurship, transformation of young people to go and make impact in the world. And so, there was just a meeting of the minds. And so, every day, I wake up very excited to come to work because, when I see some of the alumni of the university and the great things they are doing, and I see even the current students, what they can do. And I then think about the millions of Nigerian youths, how they can also be equipped to do even more. Maybe I'll give one last story before we go. So, a few months back, one of my friends, a venture capitalist from the US, Sovereign Capital, I told him, I said, we have some brilliant students that are coming out of this university, and I want them to pitch to you. I want them to show them, for them to show you their products and the businesses they are setting up. I said, I won't be there, so they will just pitch to you. I'll put 8 of them in front of you. I want you to tell me how they've done. You give me an independent view. And so the 8 group spoke to him, and he came back of that meeting. He was so excited. He said, Babs, I want to invest in 3 of them. I said, invest? Wow. I didn't tell you to invest. I told you to just listen to them and tell me how they're doing. He said, I want to invest in 3 of them. They're so good. He said, across the world, our success rate for those who pitch to us is 10%, across the world, 10%. In your own group, out of 8, I want to invest in 3. Wow. That is close to 40%. And I said to him, I said, exactly that's why I love this job. I have gone around the world. I've traveled to, probably 100 countries. I've never seen any country that has the raw talents that Nigeria has. What has been missing is creating the right environment, equipping them appropriately to be able to take on the world and really do great things. And I think that's what NUTM is able to do. And that's why I come every day, because we still have millions of Nigerian youths that we still have to, continue to support, to enable them to go on and do great things and make this country even greater than we are leaving it behind. So that's what makes me excited about the NUTM journey.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you so much, sir. It's so sad. We really have to go now. Opeyemi, over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Babs. You have been so formidable, and you will continue to be an inspiration to very many of us. Thank you for such an amazing time. Please, everyone on the call, can I crave your indulgence to just say thank you, sir? In the chat room, just say thank you to Dr. Babs. Thank you for taking our time to be here this evening. And I believe so much. I don't know about you, it's been an insightful time. There is so much to unpack. From, telling us about making sure that you look beyond where you're working, the system where you're working. After you're done delivering, you also have to go, and looking at improving, building your work and doing your work with so much tenacity, with so much integrity. Spoke about dealing with offline relationships and how that is important, that you don't be somebody who is just taking and taking and taking and taking, but you must also be a giver. you must also be producing value. That way you are able to prove your worth. Amazing. It's been an insightful time. Thank you so much, sir. A quick announcement before we go, before we cut off, I want to share this with us. The third round of our application is currently on. We are currently taking in applications for the first cohort of the NSP program. And I tell you what, the things that the NSP program is saddled around is something that you absolutely don't want to miss. It's not something you find around easily. So I want to implore you, whether you've started your application, whether you are just, in between deciding, should I not? One thing I know for sure is that it is an investment you will make that will yield you amazing results. So if you've started, please tie up your application. If you're still considering, I hope that seeing someone like Dr. Babs on the call is enough to encourage you and to make you understand the kind of people we have here. People have gone ahead of us doing amazing things who can serve as mentor for you when you also get in here. All right, so please make sure that you continue with your application. If you have any more questions that we're probably not addressing, regarding the applications or regarding your the NSP program or NUTM as a whole, please feel free to send a mail to nsp.admissions@nutmng.org. nsp.admissions@nutmng.org. And lastly, please follow our social media. We are on Facebook, we are on LinkedIn, we are on Instagram, we're on, you name it, Twitter. Look for us, follow us. Programs like this or webinars like this are for your profiting. And I know that you are taking something with you that you are using to do so much better in what has been committed to your hands in this time. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Again, thank you so much, Dr. Babs. Always a blessing feeding from your well. Thank you, everyone, for joining. We are going to be having our session. Thank you, everyone. We'll be having our AMA session next in 2 weeks. Make sure you have your eyes out on our social media. Thank you. It's a beautiful evening for you. Bye.
Bye. Have a great evening. Bye.